So without further ado, I obviously want to introduce Mesna, who is our first introducer. You'll see there's quite a bit of introducing, but there will be a lot of real content here. And also the introducing is important because we really need to get to know people and their stories and what brings them here. So what brings Mesna here is she is from Tulkarem in the West Bank, although her mother is from Taibi. She's completing a doctorate at St. Antony's College, Oxford, on the history of educational regimes for Palestinians. She was part of the Civitas Project, a collective research project to record the voices and recommendations of Palestinian exile and refugee communities. She currently co-leads the Palestine track at the U.S. Social Forum 2010 and is part of the Chicago Committee for Palestinian refugees arriving from Iraq. Mesna.
Thank you, Helena, and thank you, American Friends Service Committee, for organizing this hearing at such a critical moment in the United States' relationship to Palestine-Israel. I will introduce the theme of property rights, the systemic violation of those rights for Palestinians, and the ways in which those violations and U.S. acquiescence to them contravene U.S. values. The statistics are staggering. In the West Bank and Gaza alone, 70% of the land, in effect, is treated as state land, prohibiting Palestinians from expanding into, owning, or otherwise utilizing property that rightfully belongs to them. A growing number of Palestinians have therefore been squeezed into concretely demarcated zones, tightening population density, piling families on top of one another, and preventing a natural expansion of towns and cities. In Palestinian East Jerusalem, there has been an escalation of home demolitions. Armored Caterpillar bulldozers tear through family homes many generations old in order to build Israeli and Jewish-only settlements. Land is aggressively expropriated by the occupying state. Army watchtowers, military bases, hundreds of checkpoints, and more than 228 settlements and outposts, especially in East Jerusalem, and not least the Wall, have turned what little land Palestinians are able to live on into a pockmarked and unlivable terrain. What terrain is left to them is made thirsty by the seizure of major aquifers and the rerouting of water Palestinians desperately need for their own use and for agriculture. I'll leave the further details to our witness, but what it is important to understand when we talk about property rights is that we're not simply talking about private property, though that is crucial. After all, the right to private property is a cornerstone of the Constitution. It is a sovereign right of citizenship. In denying the exercise of that right, Israel seeks to deny a sovereign right of Palestinians to acquire a home, land, and establish a sense of physical belonging to a particular place. But in denying Palestinians access to public lands, control over water and arable land resources and roads, what is being denied are national properties, and in turn, national collective rights. Do we as United States citizens wish to finance land expropriation? Do we wish for Caterpillar bulldozers to illegally demolish homes and confiscate property? Will we underwrite the uprooting of olive trees older than our republic, the tearing apart of communities, and the polluting and destruction of vital resources? Or should we, as citizens, insist that Palestinians be given their national, collective, and sovereign rights? Now I want to introduce Jeff Halper. Jeff has been a peace and human rights activist for more than 3 decades. Born in the United States, he immigrated to Israel in 1973. In Israel, Jeff taught anthropology at Haifa and Ben Gurion universities. During his Israeli military service, he refused to bear arms or serve in the occupied Palestinian territories. In 1997, he co-founded the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. For this work, the American Friends Service Committee nominated him and Palestinian activist Ghassan Amdouni for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006. He also serves on the steering committee of the UN Conference on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. As the coordinator of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, Halper has led nonviolent direct action and civil disobedience against the Israeli occupation authorities. He's put his own personal safety on the line, facing bulldozers in front of Palestinian homes and confronting Israeli soldiers. He also organizes Israelis, Palestinians, and internationals to help rebuild demolished Palestinian homes. We're pleased to have him here. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Mesna, for that introduction. And thank you to the AFSC for organizing, I think, this very important event. And this is what gives us all in Israel and Palestine, the grassroots, the civil society of our societies, the hope and the strength really to go on. Because things on the ground are probably more dire than they've ever been. And it's very important for us all to know that we have international support. And in particular, unfortunately, we're in a situation where the governments are not doing the right thing. And they're not going to do the right thing unless they're pushed by the people. We saw this in the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. We've seen this in many other struggles, and it's true here as well. So I think, again, the message of this kind of a convocation, both for Palestinians and Israelis who are fighting for a just peace, but also to the governments who are shirking their responsibility and have for decades now to bring about a just peace, I think the message from here is very clear and is very important, and I'm very honored to be a part of this gathering today. What I'm supposed to be talking about is property rights. I mean, there's a million aspects of the occupation and of the conflict that you can talk about. But I guess it's appropriate because I'm the head of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, which is an Israeli peace and human rights organization that was founded in 1997 with the collapse of the Oslo peace process and the election of Netanyahu the first time, where it was clear that there was no intention on the part of Israel to giving up the occupation or allowing the establishment of a viable sovereign Palestinian state. And so many of us in the Israeli peace movement got together and said, we have to re-engage with resisting the occupation. And the issue of house demolitions, we went and talked to Palestinians. We asked them if we wanted to work together, what are the issues that you think we should focus on? Obviously, ending the occupation completely and totally is the bottom line of everything we do. But as a vehicle on the way to that, the issue of house demolitions has become really a central issue. It's probably one of the tragic policies of Israel that most affects grassroots people. As I'll mention in a minute, more than 24,000 Palestinian homes have been demolished in the occupied territories since 1967. But what I'd like to do is just take a minute and just back up and put this into a larger perspective, even though we don't have so much time, but I think the perspective's important. I think that what's messed up and what's caused the conflict all these decades between Palestinians and Israeli Jews isn't the coming of Jews to the country. I mean, I went to live in Israel. So obviously I felt a connection to the country as well. Zionism contained, and until today, this is a central element of the Israeli approach. Zionism contained an element that has really destroyed any possibility of coexistence. And that's the element of exclusivity. In other words, the Jews didn't come to the country and say, you know what, this is a country that's a part of our heritage. We want to revive our own national culture. We want a Hebrew language, a Hebrew university, but We recognize and acknowledge that there is another people living here that have national rights. Let's see how we can work these things out together. I don't believe the conflict was inevitable. But Zionism came in with an exclusive idea that this is our country. It belongs to the Jews. It's the land of Israel. It's never been Palestine. It'll never be Palestine. There is no such thing as a Palestinian. And the whole thrust of our policy all these years has really been ethnic cleansing. That's the title of a book by a very well-known Israeli historian, Ilan Pappé, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. So that this is really the problem. Until Israel, either by force or somehow by internal evolution, really understands and accepts that there is another people, and we have to go back to this enterprise of trying to see how we can do some form of restorative justice. We can't go back and fix all the crimes that have been committed. But how can we, like they've tried to do in South Africa, how can we get to a sense of restorative justice between our peoples? Until that happens, this element of exclusivity continues to guide Israeli policy. And you see it especially in the issue of property rights and house demolitions. Just to put this into a context, in 1948, 94% of the country that was called Palestine, between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, was owned by Palestinians. Palestinians were living in their country in a normal way. They were farmers, they had cities, they were in business, they had normal property rights and so on. 94% of the land belonged to Palestinians. 6% had been bought by the Zionist movement over the previous, let's say, 30 or 40 years. By the end of 1949, after the war, 94% of the land that became Israel was now in Israeli Jewish hands, and only 6% remained in the hands of the Palestinian Arabs. Now, this ethnic cleansing that took place, in other words, the driving out, and we know there was an expulsion, and there are books about it not only by left-wing historians, but by right-wing Israeli historians like Benny Morris that document this very, very clearly, that more than 700,000 Palestinians were driven out of the country in 1948, about half the population of Palestine. And more than 500 entire villages were demolished. More than 11 large urban neighborhoods were demolished. Many other ones were taken over. Their land was taken, became land of the kibbutzim and land of agricultural settlements and development towns that we call them, and parks and so on. But in addition to this, it wasn't only an alienation of property, but there was an entire alienation, an attempt to try to erase the Palestinian presence, the history, the identity, the culture from the country, an attempt to really cleanse the country of anything Arab. And it's a process that until this day, we call the process of Judaization. That's a word we use. It's not a word that's been made up by some left-wing peacemaker. The process of Judaization is the way that we frame our policies towards Jerusalem. We are Judaizing Jerusalem, and from the Zionist exclusivist position, that's a good thing, because Jerusalem does belong to us like the whole land of Israel belongs to us. And so the names were changed, Hebrewized throughout the country, and in a sense there's been an attempt to really transform Palestine into the land of Israel. Now, and part of the way of doing that was to take Palestinian lands and lands that were held communally and turn them into what were called state lands that were then owned collectively by the Jewish people, not by the state of Israel. And this is something that we have to understand, is that if we take the entire country together, 80-some% of this entire country between the Jordan and the Mediterranean belongs not to Israelis or the Israeli government or the small bits of land that still belong to the Palestinian inhabitants. It belongs to the Jewish people in Chicago. If you're a Jewish person living in Chicago, you have rights to settle anywhere in the land of Israel, to live anywhere in the land. The land, in a sense, belongs to you. It's held collectively, but it's held in the name of the Jewish people. And this raises a whole issue that Jews here, I think, have to deal with. Do we want these policies of ethnic cleansing and expropriation to be done in the name of the Jewish people worldwide? Because it isn't only a matter of American values and human rights. There's a matter of Jewish values as well that certainly don't sit well with ethnic cleansing. Certainly not given our history. So in 1967 then, in the 1967 war, Israel then occupied the rest of the country. What's called the West Bank of the Jordan River, East Jerusalem, including the old city of Jerusalem, and Gaza. And then the same process of Judaization and the alienation of the land from the Palestinians took place in those parts of the country. So that one of the first things Israel did was to stop a land registration process that Jordan had initiated, so that 72% of the West Bank that belonged to Palestinians but wasn't registered with the Jordanian Land Registry Office, because the Palestinians also resisted registering the land with Jordan. Jordan was seen as a foreign entity as well. All that land, 72% of the West Bank, was then declared Israeli state land, and that's the basis on which land has been expropriated for settlements, for highways, for military bases, for nature preserves, and of course for house demolitions. In East Jerusalem, all of East Jerusalem, all the Palestinian part of East Jerusalem that was not already built on in 1967 was declared open green space, meaning that Palestinian building throughout the occupied territories and East Jerusalem was frozen in 1967. And this is the problem until today, that Israel refuses to grant building permits to Palestinians. So that you've got tens of thousands of demolition orders outstanding against Palestinian homes. In East Jerusalem alone, and for those of you that have been there, you know East Jerusalem is not a very big part of the city. In East Jerusalem alone, in the Palestinian sector, there are about 230,000 Palestinians in East Jerusalem. There are almost 20,000 demolition orders outstanding, only in East Jerusalem. And we don't know, because it's secret, military, confidential information, exactly how many thousands of more are outstanding in the West Bank as well. And therefore, Palestinians that have a fundamental human right to shelter have to build homes on their own property, illegally so-called, because they cannot get building permits. And then they get the demolition orders, and you never know when the demolition order is going to be carried out. So you can get an order today, they can come tomorrow morning with bulldozers, give you 10 minutes to get all your belongings out. Let's try to see you get your belongings out of your home in 10 minutes. And you're not a criminal, and this is something that is crucial to emphasize. These are not terrorists. There is nothing security whatsoever in this policy. It's purely a policy of ethnic cleansing, of either confining Palestinians to little enclaves of what we call areas A and B, or driving them out of the country. And if you get a demolition order, they can come next week, they can come next year, they can come in 10 years. Demolition orders are forever. Or maybe you'll be lucky and win the lottery, and they'll never come. Even if you're living in your home, you're living under tremendous psychological anxiety. Imagine never knowing. I mean, I've talked to many Palestinian women who say to me, the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I look out the window to see if there's army and police and bulldozers to demolish the house. And if the coast is clear, I get dressed, I wake up the kids, and I start making breakfast. Imagine living like that for your entire life. So that this is a policy of alienating people from land, of not allowing them to build houses. We have to also understand that this isn't only a permit issue, that houses are demolished also in military invasions. In the invasion of Gaza last year, there were something like 7,000 or 8,000 homes demolished as collateral damage. They weren't targeted. In other words, Palestinian life and property really isn't worth very much. And so this is an area, I think, that has to be of central concern to us, not only because of the violations of human rights of Palestinians, violations of international law, because this is perpetuating a conflict that especially the United States is beginning to understand that it's paying a heavy price for, but because this is absolutely undermining our values as human beings, and I would say certainly as Jews. So that I think this issue should be at the center of attention, and I'll leave it at that so we have time for more discussion.